everyone, this is update for October 4, 2023, day 588 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for October 3. I'm going to start as always with strategic updates, and I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield. So first, we're going to start with Russia, and just to give you another taste of how bad actually things are in Russia. So the birth rate in Russia dropped significantly to the level of 1999, and 90s were basically a terrible time in Russia in terms of birth rate, and obviously economically was bad time there. So no surprise that the birth rate was pretty horrible then. So but then things are projected to be even worse in 2024. The birth rate is going to fall even lower to the level of early 90s, which is the worst of the worst, basically, like total bottom in terms of the birth rates in Russia. To be specific, the numbers for 2023 is 1.2 million children, and for 24 it's 1.17 million children to be born. The immediate reaction from Russian government is Ministry of Health in Russia basically tries to limit access to the medication that interrupts pregnancy. So before it was free in Russia, you can just go get it whenever you want from pharmacy. And now you need prescription. So they changed the rules. So it's much harder. Well, I don't know if it's much harder, but it is harder to interrupt pregnancy in Russia. So as you can see, the Russian government is essentially seeing the problem. They, instead of actually solving truly the problem, they're actually using this, incorrect tools to solve the problem. Let's put it this way. That doesn't really solve anything, because that's all driven by economic situation and economic opportunities, and as you can imagine, assessment of the future by the future parents. Then another thing from Russia is Russian Ministry of Defense is becoming is gaining complete control and power over society. So now it's going to be collecting all information on children from school. So basically, when you graduate from school, the school is required. So school administration is required to provide all information on the graduating pupils from the school, so they can be enlisted in the MOD, Russian MOD database, and obviously that's going to be future soldiers who are going to be mobilized. But it doesn't stop with schools. So then it's basically a pervasive system which essentially tries to, catch you in the net of the Russian MOD at every single sort of interaction with anything where government has influence. So then there's a tax collection authority also will be providing all information to Russian MOD. Then also all medical hospitals, even private medical practices are required to provide all information to MOD. No surprising, police, and then also even employers. So probably going to be more like large employers, but nevertheless, it's essentially complete structure to have a full control and ability to manage the mobilization resources for the Russian army. Also related to this, there was alarm training, or whatever, the civil defense training in Russia on October 4. So obviously that's not a sign of de-escalation. But to be fair, the same is happening in the West. So it's in many ways mutual. Then let's switch a little bit to the rest of the world. Saudi Arabia is essentially declaring energy war on the West. And to be fair, that's a result of the Western. It's essential response to the Western policies that were also effectively economic war on Saudi Arabia. So they continue their self-imposed restriction on the production of crude oil, which is going to be 1 million barrel per day. That's, as you can imagine, quite significant number. So this will continue to put pressure inflation-wise on the West, and also, as I said many times before, what will this continue? The way it's going to also put the pressure is it will make all of those so-called alternative energy projects less and less economical, and many of them will become bankrupt in the coming years. Especially, plus if you add to that high interest rates in the West, that will sort of take care of that so-called industry over the coming year or so. Then, at the same time, China is actively gaining control over Central Asia. So, Chinese crude oil producing company, they came to Kazakhstan, met with the president. So, as you can imagine, this is just oil producing company in China, and they getting highest level acceptance in Kazakhstan, where they met with the president, which is there. It's essentially, you can say that it's kind of quasi dictator there, and so they talking about building new natural gas pipeline from Kazakhstan to China. Essentially, China has a I would say real hold on Kazakhstan because technically, it's Russia's tried to have sort of Kazakhstan in its sphere of influence, but because there is no economic sort of incentive between the two countries, they're effectively competing because the crude oil and natural gas, basically energy resources, is the main export of both, and so there is no mutual compatibility. So for that reason, real control over Kazakhstan is exercised by China effectively. The reason I'm saying this is because there was a visit from the U.S. to Central Asia, where there was a nice picture with a meeting of all of the leaders from Central Asia. But the reality is it was just a picture. That's nothing behind that picture, just empty picture. The real power is exercised by China because it has the economic leverage on all of those countries in that region, and they also understand that they are facing, China on one hand, and Russia on another one, and Iran is the third one. So basically, they are surrounded by all of these countries. They understand that they have to work with, specifically in this case, with China. Then last piece of information is out of Japan. Japanese government society is also preparing for the war. There's a new law passed in Japan where government is essentially can take private companies that are important for military production, save them from bankruptcy, take control of them, basically do whatever they need, they feel needed to continue military production and to increase military production. So it essentially gives government unlimited power over the economy, over the manufacturing to produce the military supplies in large quantities as it sort of as it decides, basically. Now let's actually switch to the situation on the front line in Ukraine, and I just want to state general situation. It looks like Ukrainian forces are becoming more and more on defensive, and initiative is slowly shifting to Russian military hand. It's not sort of pronounced. It's just the beginning of the trend. Maybe it will change. It's just the early sort of stages of the trend. That's general observation of what's happening on the front line. It may, as I said before, it may mean that there is large, as I said, I cannot call this offensive, but large scale attacks are coming. Maybe not, I don't know. From Russian perspective, there is no point to attack, that they can just sit out and do this, large scale tactical attacks and basically exhaust Ukrainian resources, and over time, that's essentially guarantees Russian victory. Just because, as I said before, because Russia is at least 4 times larger than Ukraine, and the losses are roughly 1-to-1, maybe slight advantage of Ukraine, but it's not meaningful in any case. And then also Russian MOD continues stating the same, that they're not going to do any mobilization and so on. So maybe they're trying to sort of kind of like get by with the resources they have. They apparently says that Ukrainian side is getting exhausted, or at least there is not enough resources to continue offensive. Again, that's not the right word, so-called offensive, basically large-scale attacks. And so they becoming a little bit more aggressive, let's put this way. But I'd say base case scenario, they probably not going to do any large scale attacks, because it's just simply not necessary. It's like they just wait for the let's say for the fruit to ripen and fall into their hands, and that's the most efficient and effective strategy. But okay, let me start. I'm going to do it in a clockwise fashion, as I always do. So the situation along the state border remains more or less the same. Some incursions, some exchange of all sort of artillery, rocket fire, but really nothing major is happening there. Now let's move to the North Luhansk front line. So there was Russian tactical again attack in this area. This is first time in a while, but again nothing major here. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Northern sector is quiet as always. Let me just jump actually to the southern, because that's more clear picture. So what's happening is Russian troops are trying to push back on Ukrainian gains on both northern flank of Bahmut and the southern one. So far, they're not successful. Ukrainian forces also try to basically do very, very small scale tactical attacks. So it's in some ways this is exchange of basically attack counter attack, but I would say that Russian attacks are larger in scale, and therefore I put them here. But Ukraine ones essentially there is a feeling that there is exhaustion. Let's put this way. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here got really active. I'm actually marking here, it's a catch up over probably a couple months of time. Russian troops made significant advances in this southern sector. And I would say at this point, looks like Avdiyivka is in real danger of being potentially lost by Ukrainian forces. I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but effectively, Russian troops started sort of battle for actually sort of final battle to gain control of Avdiyivka. It doesn't mean that it by word final. I don't mean that sort of Ukrainian forces are losing or about to lose, but what I'm saying is they were building up this salient for a while, and now it's becoming narrow enough that you can launch sort of final attack. And so far, Ukrainian forces are holding on and not allowing Russian troops to finish the job. But I would say the way how narrow it is, it really means that if Ukrainian troops don't counter attack, they eventually will lose Avdiyivka. So it just I would say, writing is on the wall, and the situation is such that you cannot hold on in this sort of narrow corridor unless you counterattack and basically expand the width of that corridor. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not saying that Avdiyivka is falling tomorrow or in a week or so, but situation is not good for Ukrainian forces there. Then the Russian troops were much more active around Marinka, but without any success there. Now let's switch to Zaporizhya front line. Things here also somewhat similar. Russian troops also got active on their eastern side of it, and then continued their counterattacks to basically gain lost ground in their sort of western sector of the Zaporizhia front line, so far without any success. And then let's move to the last section of the front line along the Dnipro River. Things here are completely quiet. Nothing is happening. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time.